Hello and welcome everybody to the Casual Spikes podcast, episode 32, the RC Portland wrap-up edition. We finished the tournament just this past weekend. Well, we didn't. The players did because they're actually good at Magic, and turns out it's expensive to travel. But it was a great event nonetheless. We got a lot of amazing, modern matches being played. We saw, is it Murktide winning round one? It's fucking awesome. Yeah. Classic.
Fast.
Counter spells and lightning bolts, anybody? Hello. And, we had some unlikely winners, some things that we kind of expected going into the tournament as well happening. But today we're going to be bringing you the day one metagame, day two metagame, top 8 bracket. And we got some points that we kind of want to touch on in the wake of this tournament, because coming into it, we talked about it in the last episode that this was going to kind of determine like what changes people were going to make to try to beat Breach, as it did fantastic over the first few RCs that we had at this point almost a month ago. And this is going to be the big test. Like, can it keep that success going? And, that's exactly what we're going to be getting to today. But before we do, because I always seem to forget, and I don't want to do it late, but before we forget, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, and at any point you learn something, you enjoy yourself, you just want to support the two knuckleheads talking about Magic the Gathering with a burning passion of Frodo trying to throw the One Ring into the volcano, and it technically works because now they are in the Magic universe, please consider subscribing to this channel, ring that notification bell so you are notified when future episodes get posted, and to go even further with your support, because it is greatly appreciated as Greg gets suplexed over there. Please consider subscribing to our personal channels. They're both linked in the description down below. We essentially talk a lot about the same stuff here. We're both just, some casual competitive grinders here, trying to qualify for the Pro Tour and live out our dreams of not being absolutely dead last at a Pro Tour. Maybe playing a World Championship. I'm fine with getting last there.
Yeah, I think getting last at a World Championship is still like 4K that you just clear for showing up. I'd just be happy to go to a Pro Tour and say that I've been to a Pro Tour.
Hi, everybody.
I mean, that's for sure. Just give me like my opening line anytime someone asks me, like, "Oh, how long you been playing?" I've been to a Pro Tour. Not what I asked. Yeah, but I gotta tell you because I went to one. So just so you know, that's my entire personality now.
Yeah.
It's like people who like make guns their whole personality, or like politicalness their whole personality. That's just my whole personality.
Get down, turn the safeties on, shots fired. They teach you that the first day of concealed carry is you leave the safety on.
No.
You broke all the rules. Safety off, fingers firmly on the trigger. Like, the only thing you didn't do was give a courtesy knock. That's it. Come in guns a-blazing. It's kind of messed up.
Well, that is what Breach did at RC Portland, is came in guns a-blazing.
True. Real quick before I bring up the day one graphic, politely, given to me by my co-host Randy, because I'm a degenerate. Like, I'll be honest. Like, I just kind of look this stuff up, and then when I'm done with it, I just toss it in the trash. It's kind of like a used fruit snack wrapper. Like, you just hang it up in like your window. The car smells really nice. You get like the smell of just all natural fruits from Mott's, really tasty. But I just I can't, so I just throw it away. But before I bring up, that's like my favorite fruit snack. The benefits.
All 12 people that watch this.
The benefits of having a kid is that you just get all their snacks.
Jesus.
But before I bring up the day one graphic, we did basically I made it like a point where it's like it's a free square. Boros Energy is going to be the most played deck. And then I think we talked about, like Breach and Eldrazi. They were like the top decks of the format. Those are probably going to be the next set of decks that were going to show up here. So just to give everyone an insight on kind of our personal predictions of what's going on here.
I want to point out I was right about Black-White Sewers or Black-White Blink, or the Blink decks or whatever, however you want to like label them. I said this is going to be a breakout weekend for them, and it definitely was.
God, spoiler alert. Damn it.
Spoilers from a tournament that happened last week that if you're paying attention to Magic, you already know what happened.
Fine, whatever. Here's the graphic. It's right in front of your faces right now. Turns out, I would like to say we are technically right, as Boros Energy or Energy was the most played deck in the tournament. It just so happens it had exactly as many copies as the Breach decks in the format.
Yeah, I will say I did really like the fact that Star City put all the energy decks together. I really hate when I hate when you break down the decks, especially like Boros and Mardu. Like they're the same deck at this point. They're not the same deck technically. Sometimes they play Thoughtseize and like Bowmaster as the black cards, and that's the only black cards they play. And it's just like, but it's the same deck. It's trying to curve out into 1, 2, 3. Like it's doing the same thing. Naya is pretty much the same thing, and Jeskai is usually just blue for Cosign memories in the sideboard. Sometimes they do play Mockingbird. Mockingbird has started to see play. Um, but like I did like that they put all this together. Same thing with the Breach decks, the Teamer and the 4-color decks. They're basically the same thing. There's some like different sideboard cards and stuff, but like they're trying to kill you on turn 2 through unfair means.
Yeah, I also really like that they combined all the archetypes together because I remember plenty of times, at least from the like Pro Tour like Slash Worlds, when they do their metagame breakdown, it's like here's Rakdos mid range and here's Rakdos aggro. What's the difference? Well, at least back in the day, it would be that Rakdos aggro was playing like one more Heart of Kirin and one less Chandra Torture Defiance, and that was the difference. Played the same sideboard, the same same 58 cards in the main board. They just played an extra 2-drop that really isn't even like a creature, and one less 4-mana planeswalker, and that's the difference between aggro and mid range.
It's my same problem when I do like the metagame breakdowns of like for standard and stuff. They love to put like uh red green prowess, red green aggro. Same, it would be the same 75, and it would be like, let's see different card decks. I was like, I don't know what the difference is. Like maybe sometimes there's like 1 or 2 cards different, but they will just be like, yeah, man, this is prowess. It's playing the mouse package and the same cards as the aggro deck. Yeah, but it's prowess. What prowess creatures are playing that the other one's not? Well, this one has the mouse in it. So does that one. Yeah, it's different. Like, it's not different.
Oh, I love Magic so much.
And yeah, the Pro Tour is the worst for that. They break it down way too much. So it's like, all right, Boros Energy was 22 decks. Then Naya was 16. And then Mardu was 5. And then Jeskai was 12. And it's just like, cool, we can put all this together. No, they're all super different decks. Are they all doing the same game plan? Well, yeah, but they're different. They're not different. Let's put them together. They are energy. Just label it energy and move on.
Yeah, and it's kind of nice. Oh, kind of nice here because, like I said, you don't have to sift through a lot of the BS of just like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
so this is a Mardu deck, cool. Oh wait, it's the same. It's the same thing as regular energy. So while it doesn't look nearly as diverse, I would say, or maybe the fall off from certain categories are going to be a little bit sharper. It does just kind of like it is what it is. Like here's a very matter of fact thing. It's like we can acknowledge these are different, but in reality, like they're the same game plan. They're going to accomplish the same goal.
Yeah, I think the biggest one that does this is like the Demir and Esper Oculus decks because they are the same deck. Like they're just one's playing Pest Control and Stony Silence, and the other one's not.
True. And now they're going to be playing Ketchermos because Aether Drift cards were not legal for this tournament. The only
Yeah,
tournament on the weekend that these cards were not legal for.
yeah, that was a big deal too. People definitely were upset with that. They thought that was a kind of like a dumb decision. And I kind of agree with people saying it was a dumb decision. I don't think it was going to change anything majorly. I think, Ketchermos is probably the most anticipated card to see play out of like the established archetypes. I mean, that being said, like I know, some number of people were playing Hollowed One, so there's that new shark that was definitely would have saw play if they were allowed to, obviously. But like outside of that though, there's not like been a lot of like amazing breakout cards that like, holy crap, we couldn't play these eight cards that would have shaken up the format. It's like Ketchermos is like the most anticipatedly card to play, and depending on who you listen to, depends on what you think it's going to do in the metagame. If you listen to Aspiring Spike, it is the new 3-mana Oko or Uro, and you're going to see this in 4-ofs in every single deck, and that's definitely not going to happen. Calling it now. Or if you listen to a lot of the other players, they're like, yeah, this card is playable, but also kind of feels like a win more card, and I think that's honestly what it feels like. I think that it will see play in like the black white Flicker deck will see play like that will see more play there, but I think it's still probably should only be a 3 of and not a 4 of. And like the pricing on this card has been wild to watch too. I've literally watched it go from a $20 card to an $80 card. Now, as of this recording, is back down to like $45-$50. What will it be tomorrow? No one knows. It's like the stock market. It just doesn't matter.
Randy with Kendrick Lamar, levels of hate. You would think Ketramos was Drake. Out here just trying to make music for the children.
I think you mean touch the children, but
No. He is in fact a certified lover boy.
oh, children.
No. We don't listen to Drake around here. We're Kendrick fans here. At least I am. We want all the smoke.
I mean, I don't listen to Drake, so it's fine.
Moving on. We had the top 2 decks of the format tied for the most played deck in the format. We move on to Eldrazi Ramp, who has about 52 less copies overall at about 15% of the metagame. Blink, this was like a deck that kind of like the Esper bounce decks in Standard, where when we got to the Spotlight Series in Atlanta, it was a deck that was sort of kind of breaking out, and everyone's like, is this kind of the real deal? Is it not? And it had like a pretty low percentage and slowly started going up over time. Now we kind of see the Blink decks sort of kind of on the same arc. I don't think that they're necessarily going to become the best deck in Modern per se, but this is a deck that has went from, people just kind of shitting on it, saying whatever they want, this deck's bad, to it's kind of proving that it's pretty good if you get it in the hands of a capable player.
Yeah, I think Blink literally went from a meme deck to a real deck, and I think the bunch of different people who did well with it, and I think Young Dingo is probably the biggest component of that. Not so much that he was a big fan of the deck or even likes the deck, so much so that the fact that he went 4 challenges in a row top 80 with the deck. I think that put a lot of eyes on it and made a lot more people switch over to it or think about playing it. And Blink has kind of proven that it has game against everything, except for Eldrazi Ramp. That is like an abysmal matchup for them. They can win. It's not like 10%, to win, but it is a much worse matchup than anything else is. Except maybe Breach, because Breach obviously has like the ability just to win on turn 2, and most decks can't interact if you're winning on turn 2. Turns out you going turn 1 tap land or turn 1 Aether Vial and then just winning is way better than you playing your turn 1 Aether Vial. Who knew?
Turns out, unless you're also exiling one of those 2 combo pieces, when they try to go for it on turn 2, they just go for it on turn 3 and win. So
yeah,
it's like it does not matter. But going even further, we start to have like the kind of drop off we were talking about, and at about 5.5% of the metagame, we have the different Oculus decks, the Dimir and Esper versions, and then Amulet Titan to kind of round out that 5% range. And I think for me, at least when I did my video kind of recapping this regional championship, that's kind of where I ended a lot of the major thoughts for a lot of these decks, just because it felt like these decks in particular were the ones that can perform on a consistent enough basis to make a pretty big splash in the metagame, or at least have a very solid run in the tournament without necessarily having to run like incredibly hot. I'd say just having to run pretty decent, that any one of these could potentially, maybe outside of Oculus. Oculus is kind of trash, not gonna lie.
Yes, Oculus still feels like a deck that no one should be running. Like I don't know. Like, as someone who owned all the cards and was like, when I started playtesting for the RC, that was the deck I was going to take. I was like, yeah, man, I own all the cards. I like anticipated this deck being well. I purposely got the Oculuses, got the frogs and everything ahead of time. I had all the other like counter spells and stuff. But like I purposely made sure I got Oculuses and all this stuff. I was ready for it, and then like it just feels like an uphill battle against every matchup. Like, the problem is that Oculus has a great matchup against the Breach decks, but then cannot beat anything else in the format. And so, like, theoretically, Oculus, I think if you can run hot enough to qualify for day 2, you theoretically can get into a good position where you just, like, face like 5 breach decks in a row for 5 rounds and just like coast in the top 8
Oh
or like
yeah.
top 16 very easily. The problem is getting through day 1 when you're like round 1 you're like Eldrazi, awesome, terrible matchup. Round 2, oh good, energy. I'm always behind in this matchup. Round 3, another energy deck, always behind, and then now you're 0-3 starting off. You're like, cool man, I'm glad I registered this deck.
Oh
If I would
yeah.
have faced Breach, I would have had like a good win percentage all day. And so like I think that like somebody in one of these RCs is gonna register Oculus and just face like 7 to 10 Oculus or Breach decks and just like coast into a top 8 position where it's like, yeah man, I faced the deck I was planning to beat and I beat it. And then they're gonna say like, what were your losses? We lost to Boros Energy and Blink. Just couldn't beat those decks. What'd you beat? Just Breach.
Well, hopefully
You didn't play
they're.
against anything else? No, no, I just played against Breach and then just coasted.
Well, maybe these Oculus decks will get a little bit luckier now that they have Ketramos kind of joining the fold, and now they get their turn 3 combo win, and you just have to hope that God forbid someone's playing Lightning Bolt or anything like that.
Yeah, hopefully no one's playing any interaction at all. No,
Oh man.
I'm gonna be. I have a bold prediction that may come to bite me. I think the Ketramos is gonna end up not being that playable in modern. I think it has a
Oh
lot of hype
no.
around it, and I think in like by like next month, maybe less, we're gonna realize that card is like playable, but not god tier like everyone thinks it is.
Well, I mean, it is a god, so it has to be god tier.
No. It's a god, but it's not god tier.
What's a frog to a god? A combo piece, a vessel for victory. That's what it is.
Yeah, because playing Dark Blast in 2025 is definitely a good way to win tournaments.
I'm glad that you finally joined the dark side, Randall.
No, I just look forward to the fact of watching people register that and then watching them play in the modern challenge on day 2.
And they've destroyed the modern challenge because the modern challenges are a lot harder than regional championships. There, I
Okay.
said it.
Moving on.
We have Domain Zoo, Ruby Storm, and Mono Blue Belcher both holding down that 2% range there, each one being like one off of each other.
Yeah.
I mean, Domain Zoo has slowly just lost more meta share. It seems like it's like okay, but never really like that good. Ruby Storm always seems like it's really good, and then you remember that all the hate cards that everyone wants to play for everybody else also shoot you in the foot and kneecap you all at the same time. So you have to hope to get lucky to fucking
Ruby Storm will be the best deck ever if we ever have a best of 1 format in modern. Ruby Storm will just take the cake
cosign.
easily.
Well, no, is it playing? Is it on the play against Breach?
Yeah, I mean that's gonna be the 50-50 matchup where who wins the dice roll? God damn it. Lost my matchup.
All right, I hope your seven's bad.
Yeah. Hope you have to mulligan to 5 while I keep a perfect 7. Um, but no, Ruby Storm is the deck that like anytime you play against it or watch it, it feels amazing, and then you pick it up and go, oh no, it's not. It's not. As someone who owns all the cards from Ruby Storm and has played it in an RCQ, do not play this deck. Do
Some
not
say
take it to
it's
an
a
RC.
trap.
It's a huge trap. And then Mono Blue Belcher is still seeing play. It's just the problem is Belcher also runs into the same problem that every other deck is running into like this, where all the hate pieces that are good against the top decks are also good against Geo, and you have less to work with. Like people need to make sure that they are countering like 2 things from you. We have to counter either the spell that's getting Charbelcher or counter Charbelcher. And that's all we have to do.
Oh
And
yeah.
we will win the game.
Yeah, and the fact too that Belcher kind of started. I mean, it was pretty dominant before we had the December 16th ban list because Boros Energy was just being played at a higher rate than really anything else in the format. And I mean, Eldrazi or Energy is still 20 some odd percent of the metagame, or about 20% of the metagame. But turns out now that we're kind of getting a little bit more diverse at the top, quotes diverse at the top.
Yeah.
Belcher just seems like it's kind of falling out of favor with players as kind of like a good counter pick to the metagame.
Yeah. Which I wish wasn't the case, as I really like playing that deck, and that was a deck that I won my RCQ with to go to Charlotte next month. And it's just like, yeah, it's not even on my radar if I'm gonna play anymore. Like I was just like, I'm gonna make this work, and each league just feels more and more depressing as I play. I'm like, maybe not. Maybe we won't take this.
Um,
I'm just shelf you.
is there any of these decks that you want to check out, or do you want to talk about before we look at day two?
Um, I think the craziest thing is that Demir Mill had 9 copies. That's honestly surprising.
That's legit,
Um,
Nith.
Outside of that, I don't think there's anything too interesting to talk about. For day one.
No, I believe if my math is correct, there was 1,031 players that were registered for this regional championship. So just to kind of also keep in mind, the United States is the only country that gets 2 regional championships, and that was because we had 16, 17, 1,800 person regional championships. Um,
Yeah,
and
they just kept getting bigger.
Yep, and Europe, just to let you know, had like the biggest one so far, had 1,003 players. So the first of 2 United States regionals had already gotten more players than another country's single regional championship.
Yeah.
Insanity.
Yeah, the fact that DC was almost 1,900 players, right?
Yeah, it was like 1,870 something, I think.
Yeah, like we were getting to numbers where it was just unrealistic. We had people who were going, X2 and not top 64ing. And it's just like, when you get that, like, we're just way too big at that point, right? Because, like, you went X and 2 in a, 15 round tournament
Mm-hmm.
and didn't top 64 for a Pro Tour invite. Like, that is just like, hey, man, I'm glad you played amazing, but go fuck yourself.
Yeah,
You don't deserve anything.
because you're breakers. You lost too early, so now you don't get a Pro Tour invite. Sucks to be you.
Yeah. And so I'm really happy they gave the US two RCs, because like we needed it. Like as much as, like, as arrogant as it's gonna sound, like more people play Magic in the US than anywhere else, at least like competitively.
Too big.
And basically, like, we're just too big at this point. So, but yeah, I'm ready to go to day two.
Oh yeah, you know what? I am too. So there it is. You ask and you shall receive. I don't remember exactly how many players made it to day two, because you needed to have like 18 match points or better, or
Yeah.
not be blurry. Randall,
I make no promises.
well, make me the promise right now. All right, that's. Well, I was gonna say that was better, but I just got a bunch
There
of
we go.
hand in my face.
There we go.
So our day two metagame, I think there was like 200 some odd decks. There's like 109 between energy and breach, but ideally, the thing to keep in mind is that we want to know the percentage of whatever decks in day one, and then see what percentage of the metagame they were in day two, and that's going to kind of give us a rough idea of how they translated. Obviously, it's a deck is performing well if it has about the same or higher. I would say you could expect like a few percentage difference to where you could kind of surmise like, okay, like it had a pretty good tournament, pretty bad tournament, whatever. If it's in like that few percent, probably really doesn't matter. We're just looking for significant drop offs or some like pretty high like raises in the metagame.
Yeah.
And Breach smacked that in the PP by being almost 29% of the metagame.
Had a almost 10% raise going from day one to day two.
Which is absurd.
Yeah. Where in comparison, energy lost 2%. Which is, like, that's normal though, right? Like you were the most played deck going into the tournament. You lost 2% into day two. That's not terrible. That's not like, oh, the deck is trash. It's like, no, it just means that, like, some people ran a little hot, some people ran a little cold. Like, Magic still does have variance. It doesn't matter how great of a player you are. If you're mulliganing a 5 every game, you're gonna do worse than the people who get to keep 7 out every game. Like, that's just statistically speaking.
Yeah. And for us, if you have more of something in the meta, if you have more people playing a deck The idea is that for it to be healthy, it actually has a lower win rate than maybe a deck that isn't played nearly as much and has a little bit lower of a conversion rate, or it drops down in the conversion rate because, presumably some amount of them are playing each other. Shit happens, but
Yeah.
ideally for a
There-
deck to be healthy at that high, it has to have a close to a 50-50 win rate and then a relatively same to lower conversion rate.
Yeah. Like energy did perfectly well. Like it had, I think, as a whole, I think like a 50, probably like a 51% win rate, that's very healthy. That is like a 50-50 against the meta. That's where you want it to be at. Obviously, it's a little bit better than that, but like again, variance things happen, so like that's where you want it to be at. And it lost 2% going into day two, not terrible. As like where Eldrazi went up by 2%, basic or like 1 point something percent
Yeah.
into day two, but it's not terrible. It didn't go from 14 to 28%. It went from 14 to 16.
Yeah.
Like that's healthy. No one's upset about that. I mean, people are because they get salty when they lose to Eldrazi, but no one's upset about that. Like, because arguing for bans or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we saw Blink go up by 0.3%, so
Yep.
basically the same. Kind of what we expected. Titan went up by a percentage, but also like already had a small number. It had 56 going into 15, so like I think a lot of the point though we're at with Titan is like it's a lot of like core group of people who have been playing Titan for like the last 3 years. So you have a lot of people who are just like, I'm very proficient with this deck. I know what to do. I know pretty much any line, no matter what we're at in the game. So you're going to see a better conversion rate for Amulet Titan most of the time because it's not just like I picked up Amulet Titan last week. I'm playing it in the tournament. That's usually not what people are doing at Amulet Titan because it has a lot of complex lines. There's a lot of lines where it's very obvious. It's like I get Titan, I cast Titan, I haste Titan, I win.
Mm.
But there's a lot more BS lines essentially, or like, all right, I have 4 mana. If I go get Scape Shift, sacrifice my 4 lands, get these 4 lands, do this math problem, while also figuring out what I'm going to eat for lunch here in 40 minutes, and I also figure out if my opponent is going to win or not, or they have a hate piece, or they have this, and I'm like, oh, I won. It's like you had 4 mana. What did you do?
Oh yeah, modern is definitely a format where you are super paid off. The deeper you go into whatever archetype you're playing, generally speaking, unless your deck is like particularly bad in the metagame, you're usually better off like playing a deck that you have been playing. Like I would imagine for like a lot of the Oculus players, which they also took a dip in like just a little bit in their metagame percentage. If you've just been playing Oculus for the last, I don't know, probably year or two. Well, I guess not really a year because I don't think Duskmourn's been out for a year. But if you've been playing the deck for a while, you kind of understand some of the ins and outs, some of the priority spells you need to counter, when to be aggressive, when not to be aggressive, so on. That you're probably better off playing Oculus in an event like this versus just trying to pick up and play Breach or Energy, Eldrazi, the Blink deck, Titan, whatever. Just because,
Disagree.
oh well, maybe Energy because I think Energy is a relatively easy deck. Like,
I mean, I disagree with that because I think Oculus is just bad in the matchup or bad in the meta.
shoot, I think that you at least have there's at least an argument to where it's like if you're used
There is
to
a
playing
solid
a
argument.
deck that you should just play it. Like if I had to say right now, it's like I would probably be comfortable with registering something like Yawgmoth for the regional championship if I could not play. Well, I mean, if I couldn't play anything else, but it's like I know a lot more about Yawgmoth confidently than I know about any of these other decks. That while I would definitely have a lower win percentage, I think my win percentage would be lower playing something else than it would be with Yawgmoth. So I think I'm better off just playing the deck that I know and giving myself those extra points because I'm more familiar with what's going on than maybe what my opponent probably has going on.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line between this and also just like playing the best deck in the format. I think that we're at a point now where if you can do any kind of actual practice with like Breach and you have the access to the Moktopals and stuff like that, you should be playing Breach at like these RCs. Because it's just that good of a deck. That being said, though, obviously, if you don't have the access to it and you have access to a deck that you've been playing for the last, like, year plus, obviously, yeah, that's a better choice to pick up and play, take something you're familiar with and you understand the meta with. Um, for sure. But I do think that like we are at the point where Breach is like you should be playing Breach or play what you think is going to get second place.
Yeah, I mean, you should if you have like the time to like practice and play the deck, like absolutely, you're 100% right. Like this deck has just somehow gotten better. It's gotten a lot better over the weeks.
Oh yeah, okay. I was like, well, yeah, it got Mox Opal, and it no longer needs a creature on the field to win. Sorry, you like somehow got better. I'm like, do you mean because Mox Opal was unbanned for some reason?
No, just and like what we said at the kind of like the beginning of the show is that this was going to be the next major like the second weekend of regional championships. The United States, I think, was going to give us a pretty good idea of Breach
Yeah,
had a very dominant tournament in Prague. How are players going to be able to react to it and try to beat it? Because obviously the hate that people were playing before wasn't enough, and turns out Breach just did way better. Like more people played it, and even more people got into day two, from day one than any other deck. So I mean, it went from like, well, we could see it take a drop because more people are going to try to hate it out to maybe it just didn't even matter, and this deck is just that good at playing through hate, and then just also being that consistent of a deck.
yeah. I will also say something real quick. Breach was also like 50% of the top 32. So like top 32, we only care about because that's what everyone's going for the Pro Tour. So like obviously the goal, like when you sit down at the RC, is like I'm going to get first place. That's the ultimate goal. But any Magic player will be like if you told someone at the end of day two, hey man, you're going to get 32nd place, no one's going to be like, oh shucks. No one's going to be upset. They're like, oh, I only got 32nd place. Darn, I only get to go to the Pro Tour and make money. Oh, yeah. No one's sad. No one's upset about that. But Breach put half of the 32 was Breach, which is wild to think about. The fact that it was, basically everyone's end goal was to get top 32 or better, and 16 of those players were Breach players.
Just it's insane. I think even I looked at like the top 16 because at least for in my thought process, like top 16, you're like probably one or two games away, like a 1-2 turning to a 2-1 in your favor is like potentially puts you in top 8, or at least like breakers kind of go your way. Like one game goes your way plus maybe breakers just slightly a few percentage points, you're in top 8 versus like if you're in like 32nd or 25th, chances are you need like 2 matches to go your way. But
Yeah.
I think in like that top 16, like 10 or not 10, there's like a high percentage of breach. Like I think in the top 16, maybe it was like 8 breach decks in like the top 16, 8 or 10, which is
Yeah.
nuts considering when we check out the bracket, you'll see how many actually made top 8.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything else that super stands out in this metagame. I think a lot of these decks like lost like point something of a percentage.
Except for like Stormbelcher actually gained 0.4, which is kind of surprising.
And then
Because they went from 2.1 and 2.2 to 2.5.
Samwise combo as well. I forgot to talk about this. It was not on the graphic for day one, and then it put 4 people into day 2, and it was more people than Yawgmoth, and Yawgmoth was on the page for day 1, which is kind of a kick in the teeth to Yawgmoth, but he also committed like several crimes against multiple conventions of anything. So probably deserved.
Geneva's a checklist for him.
I mean, I don't know. Like, they need their own, like, court and everything to, like, thoroughly assess all the crimes that he has committed. But instead, we have Samwise that is now committing the creature crimes because, PETA is going to be after Samwise, and, the Geneva Convention is going to be after Yawgmoth. Like, it's just not a good time to be a creature combo player.
Also, notably, Mono Black Necro wasn't on the chart for day 1, it's on the chart for day 2, which is kind of interesting because a lot of people thought that deck was just kind of dead in the water after Grief got banned. I still think the deck is very iffy to play. I think the thing that the deck does well is like it has I think a decent matchup against like Eldrazi Ramp and Eldrazi Ramp. I think it can do decent enough against probably maybe the energy decks. But I think it is terrible against Blink that's going to interact with it and destroy its Necro, and Breach is, I think, just infinitely better than what it's going to interact with or how it's going to interact with. Obviously, there's different varying degrees, right? If um, they mill over a grinding station, on turn one, and you just go surgical extraction, you're probably in a lot better position than you are any other time in that deck. But like outside of like those things happening, I just feel like Necro is probably poorly positioned against Breach as a whole.
I will say something I really like from Mono Black Necro is the addition of, well, not like they just added it, but like just playing Dothy Voidwalker in the main. Just here's 4 copies. This is like my way of hating you out if you're the Breach deck, and has some utility. Like against Eldrazi, you could, in theory, live the dream. We saw it at the Lord of the Rings Pro Tour, where Jacob Beardsley got to take Christian Calcano's Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, and cast an Ulamog on turn 3.
Yeah.
Game over.
Yeah, I will say I think it has some good game in that aspect, and I think that I think Dothy is one of those cards people just forget about because it doesn't. There's no like black decks essentially, which is kind of weird to say because quick side note, like you go over to Pioneer and like black's the most prevalent color in that format, and then you switch over to Modern, it's like black's like it's playable. It's Thoughtseize. It's Fatal Push. That's about it. Like those are like the cards that are known to be played in these black decks. It's just like you got Thoughtseize, you got Fatal Push. Bowmasters is technically still a legal card in this format. And yeah, that's pretty much the only cards that see play out of black right now.
Thoughtseize like is kind of like lackluster, I think, in this format right now.
Yeah, so I think Thoughtseize is really good against the Eldrazi decks because like if you take one of like their big payoffs, like they have to find another payoff type situation.
Sure.
And then but like against Breach, I think it's terrible because like the best cards you're hoping to hit is basically Breach. And like they just have so many other ways to dig through their deck and find other cards. Like anything else you take from them doesn't matter. Like you're just hoping to hit Breach. And then like also if you're Thoughtseizing, you're hoping you're going to go Breach. Like Thoughtseize, take your Breach, surgical extraction your Breach in the same turn. Like that's your dream as like black. I also recognize that like black white blink as a deck, they play black cards. There are black cards that you play in modern, but like realistically, like there's not. Like black white blink is playing the black overlord and then also some of the other black cards.
True.
It is a mono white deck that is splashing black because 5-mana overlord is really good at not getting hit by any removal.
Also true.
And costs 2 mana most of the time.
Game recognized game.
But I think outside of that, though, there's nothing too surprising like with day one.
No, I think the big things are definitely like we see like Breach did have like a 2% increase in prog from like 25 to 27%. This one went from 19 to like 16, 17%. Eldrazi did increase its metagame share as well. And everybody else, again, where we talked about that just very small percentage, like 1 or 2 points in either direction for like these higher playing decks is totally fine. And really they all kind of fit into that mold, except for Breach, who absolutely just exploded. Compared to everything else, absolutely exploded into day 2.
Yeah, almost having a 10% increase, which is wild. While also being the most played deck, which means that its win percentage is better than 50%. It's probably seeing, realistically in this tournament, it's probably seeing like somewhere to the 55 to 56% or 1%.
Which you could start to argue is, I think, creeps into the territory of like this deck is winning. I mean, when you're like one of the most played decks, when you're at like 55, 56% win rate, that's when you start creeping into the territory of, is this actually healthy or is this fun to kind of play against, sort of thing. And that's going to be a question that has to be answered here within like the next like few months, definitely before we get into the RCQ season for Modern.
Yeah, hopefully Wizards doesn't drag their feet.
Who's not dragging their feet? Dakota with these graphics. Boom! There it is. Right in your face.
Oh, I got the top 8 graphic.
Oh, yeah. You didn't know I gave you the sound effect as the cue. Boom.
Oh, that's not what I wanted.
And I wish I could edit, so I'd be like, boom, boom, boom. You know, like the Costco guys.
Yeah. But
Oh shoot.
going into this top 8 graphic, we had one Amulet Titan here. He was first place overall, did the best. Then we had three excuse me, three Grinding Breach decks sitting at second place, fourth place and eighth place, and then we had one Boros Energy at fifth place, two Eldrazi ramp decks at third and sixth place, and then one Orzhov Blink at seventh place.
Some fun things to note. Joel Doolittle was one of the undefeated players, either that or the only undefeated player in day one on the Orzhov Blink deck.
Undefeated and then only got seventh place.
Also, earlier from day two, Peter Husisian and Peter Tabergen had played their match before in the Swiss and essentially got a rematch in top 8, which it followed the same result. Peter beat Peter. And that's intentionally left to be vague.
Makes sense. But no, I mean, honestly, not surprising to see three Grinding Breach decks into the top 8. Almost a little surprising that it was only 3. I think a lot of people thought it was going to be more than that. And then, ironically, I think it's funny that the Eldrazi ramp deck is the one that put two more copies in to the top 8 as well. Just kind of funny that that was the one that put another 2 copies and not like Energy or anything else. But we did have a pretty good top 4 though, where we had 4 different decks in the top 4, being Amulet Titan, Boros Energy, Eldrazi ramp, and Grinding Breach. So kind of cool to see. It wasn't just an all breach top 4, which I mean obviously wasn't going to happen because there was three breach decks, so it wasn't physically impossible. But it is exciting to see that it wasn't just like 3 breaches into the top 4 and one other deck you're hoping that wins.
Oh yeah, we weren't having a MH3 Pro Tour scenario where we just get mirror matches for like for the semis and the finals.
Yeah. So, but overall I think this is a pretty accurate top 8 of what we kind of expected as a whole. I said Amulet Titan would put one into the top 8. I think last week. On our last one, I was like, Amulet Titan's gonna put one into the top 8. I was like, it's gonna be like 5% of the meta, and it's still gonna put one into the top 8. And then it was 5% of the meta and put one into the top 8. It always happens because Amulet Titans is like this weird ass deck that like, oh, it's not good in this meta, says every Amulet Titan player as they just crush tournaments. Like, it's bad in the meta. You guys shouldn't play this deck. By the way, I'm 11-1 on one going into like I'm gonna double draw into top 8.
I am thoroughly pacing the field.
Yeah, this is like deck's bad though. You guys shouldn't play it. Bad meta. But no, I'm happy to see that Grinding Breach wasn't an all Grinding Breach top 8 or anything crazy like that. Which I didn't think it was gonna be anything that crazy. That being said, I do think Charlotte could be a little worse for the wearer, depending on how many people play Grinding Breach as a whole. I think we're going to see the same type of numbers going into Charlotte, where it's going to be the most played deck again, or tied for it at least.
All right, yeah, I could see it, but we're not there yet. It's like a month away, Randy.
Yeah, I know, but I got to keep thinking about it.
That's fair.
I was upset to see Joe just get thoroughly spanked by Grinding Breach. It didn't I don't know if you watched that match, but like it didn't feel close. It was just like Joe drew opening hands and pretty much just said I concede. Is how that match felt, and I don't think that match is nearly as bad. Don't get me wrong, I think that the Orzhov Blink deck has a lot of like an uphill battle against the Breach deck, but it's definitely not as bad as just like you sit down and just sign the match slip 0-2. Like it shouldn't be that bad, but it definitely just kind of felt like Joe got to the top 8 and then his luck immediately ran out. Was just like, yeah, man, you used your luck to get here. I hope you weren't trying to go to the semis or the finals because you're not making it.
I think he ended up going like 3. I think 3-3. Like it showed up a few times. He was on camera a few times on day one, or Joel was on camera a few times on day one, and the Orzhov Blink deck looked really good. And then I think he was on camera a few times on day two. It did not look good, and exactly how the kind of feature match went, I felt like how all the other matches he was on camera for ended up going was just he kind of got to start to do the thing, and his opponent just immediately was like, nope, that scares me. I'm gonna just combo and win.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think the Orzhov Blink Tech is nearly as bad as it looked in that matchup. But holy crap, did it look? It literally looked like I said, he used up all his luck to get here, and then whoever was supplying the look is like, hey man, I hope you didn't think you were gonna win this, because that's definitely not gonna happen. You can just just sign the match slip. It's over.
It didn't help too that like Jackson like just looked like he knew what was going on, and I don't mean like, oh, it was so easy to combo, even though he didn't make it look easy. There's a lot of like pretty sweet lines that he took during the tournament where it's just like this, he knows what's up. Jackson knows what's going on here and is like, I don't care what you got going on over there, I'm literally going to take your deck and throw it into the sea like I'm Weevil Underwood, and you're never getting Exodia back. Yugi, sign the match slip, loser. Give me your star chips.
Yeah, it definitely just felt like a almost a master class on the deck. Um, and then we had Eldrazi Ramp versus Eldrazi Ramp. To the surprise of no one, Eldrazi Ramp won.
Oh yeah.
And then Boros Energy versus Breach. We had Boros Energy win, which I don't think is honestly too surprising. I think when we were talking about this before we started recording, Boros Energy is one of those decks that like kind of keeps like quote unquote people keep like shitting on as like being a bad deck or like it's overplayed versus like how good it is. Boros Energy can still just go 1, 2, 3 and win. Like they can put so much pressure on you that you have to have it. And if Grinding Breach just doesn't like do that, doesn't have the win, then they just can't. And so like you don't get to keep turn 2 wind all the time or turn 3 wind all the time. Like you have to mulligan, you have variants, you have bad mills that you mill over, things like that. You have bad draws. So like it's not that crazy. And like the fact that Boros Energy kind of like beat it 2-1, I have to imagine Boros Energy probably lost game 1 where Grinding Station knew like, all right, you have no interaction for me basically game 1. I'm just gonna mulligan to like the most aggressive hand I can keep and just beat you. And then game 2, I imagine Boros Energy probably got game 2 and 3 because it's like, all right, cool, I can board it interaction now. I'm gonna drop a 1-drop creature on turn 1, drop another like 1-drop on turn 2, and it's now gonna hold up interaction for the rest of the game. You need to answer my board state while I also hold up interaction to make sure that you can't do your thing. And I think Boros Energy is a lot better position than it gets credit for in this format.
I'd seen plenty of games where Gabriel was on camera, and there was just, I think it was even against the Breach deck. I think Breach was kind of set up to combo on the next turn, and they literally went like, play a Johnny, like make my dudes, like activate my Johnny to make a cat shoot you for a bunch, and then play the enchantment, Goblin Bombardment, shoot you, transform the Sajani, dome you, and then just sack my board to kill you. Just like out of nowhere, it's just like, I don't know if Boros Energy has lethal. They're short like so many points, and it's like, oh, never mind. Like that was the second of Johnny, so we're just gonna deal 6, and then we're gonna deal 7, and then we're gonna throw all of our cats at you and win the game while you're at 18 life.
Yeah. Boros Energy is a very powerful deck. Like I said, obviously it was the most played deck in the tournament, or tied for the most played deck. It wasn't like people aren't not playing this deck. I just think that like it is. When you hear people talk about Boros Energy, people definitely kind of like talk about like, oh, you're playing Boros Energy. That's cool. Here's a crayon. Go ahead and go sit down. And like Boros Energy definitely, I think deserves more respect. And like even as like Eldrazi Ramp has like is theoretically favored against Boros Energy, it's not hard to like have to mulligan with Eldrazi Ramp, keep like an okay hand, and then it's like, cool, I curved out 1, 2, 3 and 1. Like this is what Boros Energy is essentially designed to do, and like it is a very powerful deck that I think people talk about in a diminishing way. Not to say that we haven't done that ourselves, but it definitely is one of those decks. It's a very powerful deck that people kind of like, oh yeah, Grinding Breach is the best deck in the format, and like it is. But I do think that when Grinding Breach eventually gets banned or something gets hit out of it, Boros Energy is going to be there to pick up the slack yet again and so go, hey, remember why I was the best deck in the format? and was still competing against the deck that was winning on turn two,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm still here, guys. I don't know if you forgot, but like curving out still good in modern. Who knew?
True. Energy is still pretty good. Turns
Yeah.
out.
And Titan still does broken things and will never get touched.
Amen.
Mm.
But I mean, this top eight was interesting.
It was
It was
also,
interesting.
I think it was still a relatively healthy top eight. I know, Grinding Breach put three into the top eight, but like, it still wasn't like terrible. Like, it didn't feel like Grinding Breach was overtly oppressive. We saw it, lose to Titan, which essentially it should have a better, like, Grinding Breach should beat Titan. It lost to Boros Energy, which again, theoretically is like not a, I think it's like closer to a 50-50 or maybe like a 52 to 48% matchup. Um, Flip a coin on who you think is ahead in that one. Um, and it beat Orzhov Blink, which Orzhov Blink has trouble beating that deck. That is a known factor. That is like one
Mm.
of the biggest problems playing the deck. Um, so like, it didn't like dominate the top eight that it went into. Clearly, these are all accomplished Magic players. No one who makes it into the top eight was just like, yeah, man, I picked up Magic yesterday. Like all these people knew what they were doing. They knew they had a game plan for all the top decks. It wasn't like they're like, oh, Grinding Breach. What's that? What's that do? What's your deck do? You know, People had game plans for this. They had plans. So I think overall it was a pretty successful top eight, despite there being three Grinding Breaches that made it into the top eight.
Yeah, I mean, 5 different decks in the top eight. Decent diversity, decks that we kind of expected to be towards the top of the metagame, or decks that we said at the beginning of the show that these decks could threaten to win a tournament. So I mean, kind of par for the course. Grinding Breach probably doing exactly what it needed to do. Best deck in the format, and to a lot of people, it's not even close. That's the best deck. Put 3 copies in the top eight. I mean, just short of winning the event.
It did
The
everything it could.
I mean, it had a fantastic tournament. Even not winning, it had a fantastic tournament. It was probably, I would say, the best performing deck. Sure, there was one Amulet Titan, or there was like 2 Amulet Titan players in the top 10. Of course, one was the 1 seed and ended up actually winning. But I think when you look at the full body of work, like most played deck at every stage of the tournament, and was like 1 game away from winning the whole thing, is just absolutely insane. Like it's crazy how good that deck is, how consistent it is, and turns out even with people having the ideas and knowing that this deck is coming in hot and it's not going to be a small percentage of the metagame, nothing's holding it back. It is coming for the top spot in the metagame, so you need to be prepared for it. And players prepared, and it doesn't seem like it mattered.
No. So just real quick to break down the top 32 because I have these numbers on hand. Grinding Breach was 16 in the top 32. The next deck was 6 with Eldrazi Ramp, followed by Energy with 5, Orzhov Blink with 3, and Amulet Titan with 2. So yeah, Amulet Titan like won the tournament, but I would definitely much rather take Grinding Breach this to the next RC than I would take Amulet Titan, just based off of those numbers alone. Like the fact that, like I said, Grinding Breach had 16 in the top 32, and then the next was 6. Like that is a vast difference there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
the 50% of the players qualify for the Pro Tour playing the Breach deck. You had most played deck in day one, most played deck in day two by a wide margin. Most players qualified for the Pro Tour. Most decks in the top eight. It's just this.
yeah,
If it won, that it's probably one of the best tournament runs for a deck like ever that people wouldn't consider necessarily a tier 0 deck, or at least I think the majority of people consider a tier 0 deck, because like, we've probably seen like colorless Eldrazi and like Hogak perform very well at tournaments and perform at like a high rate, but like Breach was just like, this is like a tier 1 deck just like these other 2 decks, and turns out it might just be just that much better than the other 2.
yeah. So I think I saw someone say this, and I think it's a very accurate statement. Where like usually like you have like these tiers, like tier one, tier two, tier three style decks. And I think the problem we're seeing is that the difference between like tier one and a tier two deck is like several tiers different when it comes to like these top tier decks. And I would even argue that I think probably like the top three decks based off of like people who are going to play them and number of people you'll see against these people would be like Grinding Breach, Eldrazi Ramp, and Energy would be like my tier one. And then if I had like I think Orzhov Blink, like I think Amulet Titan's also tier one, but like you're not gonna like the odds of you playing against Amulet Titan is a lot lower than playing against the other three I just mentioned. And I would put Orzhov Blink probably in like it's probably like tier 1.5. It's not a tier 2 deck, but it's also not. It doesn't feel like a tier 1 deck when you compare it to like what Energy's doing 1, 2, 3, what Eldrazi Ramp's doing 1, 2, 3, and what Grinding Breach is doing 1, 2, 3. Like they're just doing so much more efficiently too. And like it's just kind of wild what they're doing. And like when you then go sit down with your other style decks, like where you're just playing when you sit down with Oculus, right? Like I think Oculus is a solid tier 2 deck, and you play against Eldrazi Ramp, like you just don't feel like you're remotely keeping up. Like you feel like you're behind. You play against Energy, you feel like you're behind from like turn one. Like your best hope is that their turn one play is like fetch, get a surveil land, and like do that. Like that's your hope that that's their turn one, and then their turn two and turn three are going to be way more explosive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like it just feels like you're behind starting from turn one. And I think that's not necessarily a problem, but it is a problem in the sense of how powerful the decks are in modern right now. To where if you're not kind of playing, essentially one of these five decks, I'll say, Grinding Breach, Eldrazi Ramp, Energy, Orzhov, or Amulet Titan, you're you're not putting yourself in the best position to win. Now, obviously, I do think that like having some familiarity with the format, playing a deck the ins and outs of, can help you. But like, there's also a reason why your deck that you're playing that you've been playing for the last year and a half isn't tier one. It's not because you're a bad Magic player; it's because the deck is not as powerful as what the other decks are doing. And I think it is something that a lot of Magic players need to come to a realization of. And it is one of these things that you need to realize that if you're going to play in like a high end tournament, it's okay just to play what is considered the best deck in the format. Like there's a reason why it has that consensus, or what is one of the top three decks of the format. Like there's a reason why these have these this consensus exists. It's not because everyone's a filthy net decker who can't figure out how to play a different deck. It's because these decks are just playing the best of the best cards.
Yeah, if you can give yourself enough time to prepare with like one of the tier one decks in the format, then by all means, like go for it and switch off of it. But I still stand firm on the you can't just for most of these decks. I would say like Boros Energy is the only deck that I'd be confident that like if you had like 2 weeks and you got to play like a decent amount of Magic for like 2 weeks, you could probably piece together a lot of the stuff for it. And all the disrespect to it, but a lot of these other decks, if you're able to play enough and test enough thoroughly and kind of get a lot of the mechanical stuff down, maybe you'd be okay picking them up. But I'm definitely still in the camp of like, if your deck is like remotely playable and you just know it better than anybody else, I would much rather take that deck than try to audible and figure out what to do as like one of the other top decks of the format. That's coming from a person who made a living doing that in modern, basically, by not really getting to do much of anything.
That's fair. Like I said, I think that there's also a difference between when you were playing super big in modern and where we are now with modern.
I mean,
Um,
maybe. I still thoroughly believe though in the just know what you're doing,
your
know what
deck.
your cards do, know how your cards interact with like the other cards of the format. And I think there's going to be times where you just run into players that don't know what's going on, or maybe can't piece together what's going on, and that's just kind of like more points in your favor on top of already having those extra made up percentages or real percentages of just knowing what's going on. And I think
Yeah,
that's the big thing, is being able to piece together like, what is my opponent doing? Because like the obvious is super obvious. It's the like the deeper thing. It's like, okay, I know what they're gonna do now on like level 4 or 5. Now this is how I gotta interact with it, rather than me playing Breach, you playing Breach, you playing it for like the last 6 months, me just picking it up, and me being able to kill, but I don't understand it or I don't know how to, because it's like I got to make 4 or 5 different plays to get there, and you now getting that opportunity where you're just like in the same position, you're like, okay, easy, do, I win, kind of thing.
Yeah, I do think there's some difference in that regard, but I do think at the same time, like I think depending on what we're talking about for time frame of learning a deck, I think that like right now, for example, if like for some reason someone gave me a breach deck right now, I would audible to that right now for um for Charlotte, and like I have like essentially less than a month to prepare for this. I would 100% audible to Grinding Breach right now with less than a month's time frame to play it and test it. Because I think that it is just such a much better deck. I also think that I'm a confident enough Magic player to where I can pick it up and learn it pretty well. So I mean, maybe that's some arrogance on my own part or not, but like I do think that it's a good enough deck that there's not a reason for me not to play it, other than the fact that I don't have access to most of the cards because I'm a poor kid.
Sheesh.
Uh, but I think that pretty much wraps up all of what we want to talk about for Portland, unless you have something else in your mind or something else you want to talk about.
No, not specifically. I think we've kind of touched on some of it. Let me bring up my notes here real quick because I know I have them here. Yeah, no, I nothing else. I think our stances on like what needs to happen with Breach are probably maybe pretty obvious at this point. Like if we just go through this whole season where Breach is just doing this thing where it's 20% of the metagame, and then it's almost 30% of the metagame, and then it's the majority of the players qualifying for the Pro Tour are playing this deck, and the majority of the top 8 is Breach. I think we can probably all agree that it needs to get banned, but there's going to be some idiot that comes in here and is just like, oh, well, just because it wins a lot doesn't mean that it should be banned. Like, people just need to adapt, even though it's been 3 months and nobody's adapted to it.
So it's funny you say that because Frank Carson, the wonderful man, the
No,
myth, the
don't throw
legend.
Frank under the bus.
No, I'm not. He has all the modern win rates for the RCs in Japan and the one in the US. And I don't know if you have that graphic.
No, I don't have it. Did you send it to me?
I sent it to you.
Shoot. All right, I'll throw it in post.
Okay. So if you look at the win rates here, Team of Breach had a 58.2% win rate. That's troublesome when it's also the most played deck, basically. Because I guess technically it wasn't the most played deck when you combine the RCs for Japan and US. It was 15.1% compared to 16.8% for Boros Energy. But Boros Energy, we go down here, only has a. Where are you, Boros Energy? Oh, sorry. Boros Energy had a 47.2% win rate compared to Teamer Breach, which had a 58.2% win rate. That is a troublesome win rate when it's also essentially the most played deck in the format. Which means that like not only is it played a lot, it's also winning a lot. So the meta just needs to adapt is trying to adapt and not doing well with it.
Really quick too. That's all just it doesn't count like mirror matches or anything like that in that number, right? It's just strictly like this
No,
deck
it doesn't.
versus something other than itself.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah. Because in
makes sense. Yeah.
the thing up here, it has like he has it broken down by like versus like Boros Energy, Teamer Breach, and like Teamer Breach just has an X through it. Like Eldrazi, Blink, Titan, Oculus, Jeskai Energy, Four Color Breach. So it does count against Four Color Breach because there is a difference between those two,
Mm.
essentially. So, but like even if we take away that, like that's still a ridiculous percentage we're looking at then of where it just has um it basically has a good matchup against almost everything. Like when you look at Teamer Breach's thing here. Against Boros Energy, it had a 59% win rate. Against Eldrazi Ramp, it had a 59% win rate. Orzhov, it had a 56. Excuse me, Titan, it had a 56. Esper Oculus, it had a 47. And Jeskai Energy, Jeskai Energy had a 47. So those are the two matchups that I did terrible against. Terrible being, not greater than 50%.
Mm-hmm.
And then against Four Color Breach, I had a 59% win rate too. Um, but then we look at how well Jeskai Energy and Esper Oculus did. Esper Oculus had a 48% win rate overall, not doing too well. And Jeskai Energy had a 53.4 win rate. So at least, that's doing okay. But
Yeah.
just the fact that like Temur Breach only has a bad win rate against the decks that play counter spells, probably not a good sign that like this deck is just dominating.
True. When Murktide was probably the best counterspell deck, and it's not one of the worst decks you can play, but went from probably a tier 1 deck somewhere in the mix, had an argument, to solidly a tier 2 deck, it seems.
Yeah. And so I think it's just wild that like people want to argue that Breach isn't a problem, and like I think that with the RCs, like you can't just ban like Breach right now. Like people are preparing for RCs, they picked up cards. I think it's fine to let it run through this RC season, but as soon as this season's over and before we go to the RCQ season, they need to ban Breach. Breach needs something hit. If you want to weaken the deck, that's fine, but like if you want to kill it, like it probably just needs to be like we just need to ban Underworld Breach and move on with our lives. Underworld Breach is only going to continue to get broken. Like it's banned in Legacy, it's banned in Pioneer. It probably shouldn't really be legal in Modern. It was only a matter of when, not if, and no one's surprised. And I don't know. It's just one of those decks that like it definitely needs something done with it, and I hope Wizards doesn't like make us play through a whole RCQ season of just Breach is still the best deck in the format.
Yeah, hopefully not. There's a reason when Underworld Breach was printed that people were immediately dubbing it like just the Yogg-Will. It's going to be Yogg-Will in like Legacy, in Modern, in Pioneer, and so far, at least in 2 of those 3 formats, it lived up to that that hype. I did a video on Underworld Breach, and it was banned in both formats within 7 months of being released, and it was like dominant tier 1 strategy. Like you're either playing, like in Pioneer anyway, you were either playing that or you were playing the dumb like inverter combo at the time, so you were like the only thing that rivaled Underworld Breach in either of those formats was equally dumber combo, ironically from another card that was in the same set as Underworld Breach, was the only way to compete against Underworld Breach.
Yeah. Crazy.
And even then, Underworld Breach just comboed faster than that deck. So we need to get out of the format. It seemed like it was fine in Modern for quite a long time, but one degenerate broken combo deck is enough just to say, okay, this is not fine, because as long as it's legal, there's going to be other combo decks that have the potential to abuse the graveyard using this very unique effect that no other Magic card really does for you, because a lot of them just exile the cards, and this for some reason is just like exile other cards. You can keep this one, and turns out that is absolutely insane.
Yeah, who would have guessed it? But no, I do think Breach needs to be answered. I think that we're going to see it. Like I said, I think it's fine through the RCs. People have already spent money trying to build this deck, things like that. It would be stupid to do that. That or you reban Mox Opal, I think, is the only other option, which I think Mox Opal is fine, though, with Underworld Breach gone. Like, it's not a broken... Like, there's nothing broken in or enabling it, essentially. Like, you're not doing anything inherently broken with it. Like, it's good in the artifact decks. It, helps some other decks out, but it doesn't do anything insane. It's not like, oh my god, my opponent played Mox Opal and they powered out a 2-drop earlier. Or, they did something... They played a couple more... They played a couple more things than they should have, but like it's not like they're doing anything inherently broken, because like Metalcraft is kind of a challenge to put on or turn on essentially. Or it's not a challenge to turn on, but it's a challenge to like turn on and also play good cards with it when you're turning on Metalcraft. So I don't think it's a problem if we have Box Opal in the format, but I do think that like this is something we need to realistically discuss banning. And Wizards needs to take a hard look at it before we have the next RCQ season of Modern.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I personally don't like going back to banning Mox Opal. I think outside of this one deck, it's just fine. Sure, if there's like one of every like 4 or 5 games, even Affinity has like a super busted draw where they just get to like dump their whole hand on like turn 2 and then like end it with like a thought monitor. Sure, whatever. Like it's gonna happen some amount of the time, but it's a lot better than like Breach killing you like one every 2 games on turn 2. So
Yeah, exactly. And it's probably they probably play a quick Kappa Cannoneer.
I mean, either way, like Cap,
That's gonna kill you faster than the Thought Monitor.
yeah, like I'm just here. I go. Like, here's like me playing my just random artifacts. Like, oh, now it's a 6/6, can't be blocked. Oh yeah, and it has ward 4. It might as well be hexproof. Like,
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think that Mox Opal is fine. I think Breach needs to go, or Grinding Station if you want to keep Breach around for whatever reason.
yeah,
Like both those cards should be on the chopping block. This should be what we should see here after the RC season.
and we should also like Dick Cheney style hit something off of the amulet deck. Just because why not?
We just ban Amulet.
Friendly fire.
Yeah, no problem with that. But outside of that, I don't think that if Team of Breach goes down, I don't think anything becomes crazily better. I don't think that like Boros Energy becomes the best deck. It might become like the best deck of the format, quote unquote, but like it's not going to have a 58% win rate.
Mm.
Like we're not going to see something crazy like that with Boros Energy. It's going to probably stick right around the 51, 52%, maybe get up to 53%, but it's not going to be anything crazy, and it's not going to be a deck you can't beat. It's not like when they had the ring. So I do think it's just a matter of time before Breach gets banned. Obviously, let us know what you think in the comments. Let us know if you think that Breach is going to get banned, or if you think it shouldn't get banned because you have a vested investment in Mox Opals.
A dragon's
Oh.
horde of Mox Opals. I go home and I sit on my Mox Opal chair and drink from my Mox Amber teacup, and I write angry comments online with my Chrome
About how
Mox keyboard.
But
How
no,
dare you?
I do think that we are at the point where we need to seriously discuss Team Breach getting banned. Obviously, if it comes out, in Charlotte and like Breach just gets raffle stomped because people learn how to beat it, there's no way I think that happens in a million years. But like, if by some miracle that happens, then sure, I guess we can think about how Team Breach doesn't need to get banned because it just turns out everyone needed to run 11 sideboard cards for it because that's definitely a healthy meta. Um,
Just to somebody, it is.
yeah, but no, I think we're at a point where that deck needs to be looked at to getting banned. With a 58% win rate. Outside of that, I think the meta is relatively healthy. I don't think anything's doing anything inherently broken or anything like that. I'm curious to see if Hollow One makes a big jump in playability just because of the new Shark that came out from Aether Drift. Um, I can see that seeing a lot more play, but I think that deck also loses to variance more than anything else with itself when you each discard 3 cards at random, or draw 3 cards and then discard 3 cards at random, and you watch your 3 hollow ones just go to the graveyard while you're looking at your hand of not hollow ones that you could have played for free.
Oh yeah.
So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with that as a whole. That's the only deck I see kind of like getting not better per se, but like seeing more play out of nowhere essentially.
Yeah. I hear you. You are valid in your opinion. Um,
Also, the new Black White God's a trap.
Stop it. All right, we're ending it there. Sacrilege.
Well, yeah, I'm an
If those
atheist. I
kids
don't
could
believe in
read,
God.
they'd be very upset right now. Well, I think that's it. Is there anything else you want to add, Randy, aside from desecrating our new God Overlord?
No, I don't think so.
Thank God. All right. Thank Ketchermos. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Casual Spikes podcast. Again, if you made it this far, definitely consider subscribing. Then you're basically obligated to at this point. You've been given almost an hour of entertainment, so definitely subscribe, ring a notification bell, get notified of future episodes. Leave any comments down below pertaining to the show if there's anything that you want answered as a question, or you just want to leave some thoughts for us. We do greatly appreciate that. And of course, check out the description to our YouTube channels. You can go and support us over there. You can get even more content from the both of us. And yeah, that's going to do it for this episode. Hope you all enjoyed it. Have a good night. And we hope to see you for the next show, where we're probably going to be getting a little bit into standard, I would
Pro
say.
Tour. Yeah,
Pro Tour.
standard in the Pro Tour.
So definitely be on the lookout for that. And yeah, see y'all later.
Bye.